Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Relationships Made Simple for Men podcast. I'm Bryce Bauer. I'm a men's group facilitator and relationship coach. I do couples work with my wife, and I also run in-person men's retreats here in St. George, Utah. Today, I want to talk about irreconcilable differences. Often, when you see a celebrity couple get divorced, they will cite irreconcilable differences. It's pretty vague. What does that even mean? And I want to break that down because a lot of individuals and couples that come in to see me or us are dealing with something that's pretty intense, and they're trying to figure out if this can be worked on, if it can get better, or if they should step out of the relationship. And it's a really big decision and a really painful decision. So I want to add some color as to how to think about making a decision like this, how to think about it. The first thing to know is that if you're in a long-term committed relationship with anybody, there are going to be things that you do not agree on that are irreconcilable, whether it's what you consider to be clean, whether it's how you want to live your life, whether it's how you think about a specific topic, politics, religion, how to deal with extended family, how to parent, how to manage money, how often you want to have sex. There's just so many ways to be different, and you're not going to agree on everything. And so, no matter what, if you're in a long term partnership, you have to learn how to be able to hold big differences and talk about them honestly and have boundaries for yourself, because there's no way to avoid this completely. In some of the Gottman's research, they say that couples will live with 8 to 10 irreconcilable differences throughout the course of their relationship. And I've always found this to be the case. I've never worked with a couple where they just agreed on everything. I mean, maybe they wouldn't come in to see me if that was the case, but every couple has big things that they disagree on, and it doesn't seem like it's compatible. There's conflict there, there's tension, there's energy, there's buttons that get pushed. And without necessary skills, people can stay stuck in patterns for years and years and never learn how to talk about things. So either avoid them or continually fight about them. And there can be different versions of a pattern, but every couple is going to have their stuff, their patterns, and it's really how do we work towards a deeper understanding of what's happening for the other and ourselves so that we can hold that together. That's what a secure partnership can do. They can hold big differences together. They can feel safe to talk about them. They can feel okay getting into conflict and resolving it, because that's what it takes to create deeper understanding. That's what really creates this mindset that we can talk about hard things, go through hard things, have big differences, and come out the other side as a team. And the more you do this, the more confident you feel as a couple to continue to do it. Because however long you're going to be together, if it's decades, just think about how much stuff could come up during that time. And much of it will be unexpected. You have to learn how to deal with this, no matter who you're with. And some people might be easier to deal with than others. And sometimes I think it might be a luck of the draw, because you only meet so many people in your life that you start a relationship with. So some people are going to be more compatible than others, but I don't think that that's a problem. We draw people into our life that are going to help us grow and learn. Sometimes people will ask, I don't know why I married someone who's so different than me. And I'm like, well, if we're taking the stance that the world is here to help us wake up, then of course you're going to draw someone into your life that pushes just the right buttons, helps you look into areas of your life or your psyche that you haven't looked into before, so that you can grow and have more range in an area of your life or an experience or an emotion. I think about this sometimes with my wife, Jenny, who's very feminine and very emotional. I mean, she can be moved to tears from watching any show, any movie. It just comes up. And I tend to be more masculine and stoic. I mean, part of that's my conditioning, but I can be tougher and more rigid. And she has really helped me through her sensitivity open up to my own sensitivity and practice softness and patience. And those were things that were lacking more in my life prior to meeting her. So if you're a man that's concerned or frustrated with how emotional your partner is, it may be helpful to take on the mindset that you have some room to grow here, to step into your own emotions more, your own somatic experiences, and to grow your range to be with different emotions and to be expressive and to get more vulnerable and to practice softness with yourself and the people in your life. And although this can be really challenging for me at times, I've noticed an enormous change in me in the last 10 years. I don't get triggered as easy. When I'm feeling upset about something and frustrated, I have more understanding about what's happening underneath the surface, that often there's fear or shame or guilt or sadness, and that the frustration is what's covering that and protecting me from it, from actually feeling it and going there. And so I'm able to process things more quickly than just staying in frustration or compartmentalizing it or distracting myself from it. Again, I don't do this perfectly, but I feel more capacity in me. And a lot of that has come from Jenny and being in a relationship with her, where having to hold someone else's experience along with my own has grown my capacity. And so that's what I'm trying to teach men to do. Some are better at it than others. Sometimes it's even flip-flopped, where the man is more emotional than their partner. But for the most part, I think men really struggle with being more expressive and open and vulnerable and being okay with some of those more negative emotions. So just take a second to take that in. What if some of these things that are really frustrating you and are painful are really here to serve you and help you grow? And those can come through the lens of irreconcilable differences. And I think the sequencing is important. So you may be at a place where you're trying to figure out whether or not you want to stay in a relationship or continue a relationship that's new. But before you take on that project, think about what there is to gain from just being in this experience right now, because this is what's happening in your life right now. Where are you being called to step up more? What might you be avoiding that is making this situation more difficult than it has to be? Because if you can do this move first, then whatever decision you make to stay in the relationship or not, or really step into working on it, you'll feel more confident with that decision. It'll feel more aligned because you're coming to the decision with some purpose and some understanding, and not just an impulsive decision to fix it and get rid of the feelings and be done with it. So I think it's helpful to take on this mindset first, no matter what. So now that you have that, I want to talk about what irreconcilable differences are, the different types, and how you can work through them or with them. There are basically two types of irreconcilable differences. There's the type that you can live with and the type that you can't, because we've established that they're going to be there no matter what in a long-term partnership. So you either get to decide if this is something you can live with or something you can't. And often there will be things that you aren't sure if you can live with or not. So you want to work on them. You want to see if it's possible for you and your partner to come together on these issues and hold your differences together. And the list of things that are truly irreconcilable is probably pretty small, objectively. So I'm thinking about the decision whether or not to have children. I have a hard time seeing a way in which one person would really want to have the experience of being a parent and the other one doesn't, and that you somehow raise a child where one is the parent and one isn't. I just don't see how that works. Or if one person really wants to live abroad and travel all the time, and the other person really wants to be in one city and close to their family and is kind of a homebody. Again, I'm wondering how these people started a relationship in the first place, but those, again, would be very different. You can't be in two places at the same time. That would be hard to make work objectively. But many of the other things I think could be worked on if both parties really want to work on it. Communication differences, differences in parenting, differences in how you look at money, spending money, making money, general lifestyle. And a lot of those will just boil down to communication issues. Another irreconcilable difference that's coming to mind that would be really difficult to manage is if someone is in an active addiction in the relationship. You can't really be in a long-term partnership if you're and have any type of intimacy and connection and trust if one party's in active addiction. I see that more as an individual issue. I have a lot of experience in this area, both personally and professionally. And if one party or both parties are in active addiction, That is an individual issue that you have to go get support for. You need to raise the level of care until you are able to manage your own health. And often that takes at least a year. That's like the benchmark. A year of sobriety to really see what you're working with, a year of therapy. Oftentimes people have to go to residential programs for a period of time and then get ongoing support after that, because you're not going to be able to do these higher level skills of communicating if one person's fucked up or is getting hammered or high and you're having these big blowups and breaches in trust. Coming back to the core of most irreconcilable differences is how you talk about them. So what matters most in this situation, if you have something that is more subjective, is understanding to what degree you and your partner are willing to step in and work on these issues and get support, both individually and together. If you're in a position where you really want to learn and grow and work on this relationship and your partner's like, I'm not doing any of that, I'm fine how I am, I can live with how this relationship is going, and I'm not doing a damn thing about it, then I wouldn't expect your relationship to improve at all. In fact, I think those differences are going to become more apparent and more glaring, and your relationship is probably going to get worse. The more you step into wanting more, the more you're going to see the gap in what you're wanting. And that's the most obvious case. And people find themselves in that position quite a bit, where one person isn't willing to do anything and the other person is like, okay, well, what do I do with this? I don't see any other option than leaving the relationship. And sometimes actually leaving the relationship, or at least taking the steps to start the process, lights a fire under the other person. And then they want to work on it because they're faced with the reality for the first time that they're going to be alone if they don't step up. Now, I know people get confused around ultimatums, and they're like, well, I don't want to give an ultimatum. I don't see this as an ultimatum. This is just you being honest with yourself about what you need and what you want and taking the necessary action to get there. Just because the consequence sucks for the other person doesn't mean you're the bad guy and that you made an ultimatum. Whatever, call it an ultimatum. So what? You got to make a decision that's best for you. It doesn't make any sense to stay in a relationship that you're really not happy in, you really don't feel okay with, and there's no hope of it changing. For the rest of your life, I don't think anyone should make that decision. Even having kids, I don't think is a really great excuse, because they're going to watch their parents grow up in conflict or disconnection, and that's what they're going to see. They will at least have a chance to see their parents take a stand for what they really want, or maybe one parent, and possibly create a secure relationship that's being modeled to them, instead of seeing something that you really wouldn't want your kids to have. Hopefully that makes sense. I know that in a lot of ways, keeping the family system intact can seem like the best move, but at what cost? I work with a lot of adults that experience their parents as being resentful and having a lot of conflict and just staying in it, and seeing that fuck them up. They didn't get to see a model of two people in a secure relationship. So it's going to make it harder for them to create that in their own lives as adults. Now, what can be really confusing is when your partner says they're willing to do some work on it, they're kind of willing, or they're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, wishy-washy, back and forth. And so you're like, are you doing it or not? Are we doing this or not? And being in that space for a long period of time can really erode trust. And I'm not going to tell someone whether or not they should stay in a relationship, as long as they're physically safe and emotionally safe enough. So this really is up to you, what you're willing to deal with. But the more that you develop yourself and understand relationships and what's possible here, the less tolerant you're going to be for some of the stuff that you've probably put up with in the past. That's normal. That's a normal part of growth. You can outgrow your partner. And sometimes it's slow, where you're doing this for years and all of a sudden you look back and they're still where they were 5 years ago and you've changed a lot. But either way, I think the strategy that works best is to continue to grow, ask for what you need, and see if they can show up. And the growth paths don't always look the exact same. Sometimes one person starts before the other. Sometimes one person's faster than the other. It's always going to look different. But the litmus test is, can you look objectively at what someone's doing to improve their relationship abilities, their communication skills? Can they articulate what's happening inside them, what they've been through in their past, how they're mapping it on to their reality today Do they have awareness? And are there real changes in them that you can see? Less blowups, staying engaged for longer periods of time, not disappearing for days on end, them actually having tough conversations with people in their life. Those are the things we want to look at. The behavior is what matters, not what someone says. Action is what matters. And I can give you some examples from Jenny and I's relationship because we've done a lot of work on this, years of training programs, individual and group therapy and coaching calls, and thousands of hours of talking through these things. And I think most couples will be able to relate. So one of Jenny and I's core differences is the way we think about making decisions and where we put our energy. And a common core difference is togetherness first and independence first. So when we come to an issue, togetherness first means that we're thinking about how do we get everyone's opinions and views in here together and move from there. And independence first looks like the person wanting to get clear on what they need and want first, and then bringing it to their partner. And there's not a right or wrong here. You might say, oh, if you're in a relationship, you have to be togetherness first, but that's not necessarily true. You have to be able to do both. And so it's just the way that we lean. Like you really do have to focus the attention on yourself at some point to get clear on you want, regardless of what's happening over there for your partner, and then bring that to them and then work on it together. So it's just the sequencing of it. But in a difficult moment, we can polarize and I'll just go to focus on me and Jenny will be trying to focus on the us, and there can be conflict there. And we can be judging each other where I'm like, well, how about you get clear on what you want first, and then you can bring that to me and then we can talk about it. And Jenny's like, well, how about we just start to brainstorm together and then we can figure out, we can like break down what each other needs individually. So again, you have to do both, and both are great skills to have, but we do still get into issues here because I was conditioned as a young boy to figure it out on my own. And Jenny very much lived in a way where issues were talked about together. And we can still have conflict come up here. It's a lot more subtle now. But prior to having some of this framework, we didn't really understand what was going on. Let's say we were planning a trip. I remember we were planning a weekend trip, and this was actually really difficult for both of us early on in our relationship. I brought in the idea of doing a trip to the desert, and Jenny was talking about the things that she needed. She wanted to stay at an Airbnb and that we could go hiking during the day. And I was like, no, I'm kind of wanting like more of a camping experience. So you can see the difference there, right? She's like, okay, how do we both get what we want? We can do the outdoor stuff, but let's stay in the Airbnb. Let's talk about this. And I was like, no, I'm already clear on what I want. It's different than that. And then I ended up saying, well, maybe I'll just go on my own. And this wasn't the best move that I've ever made in relationships. Really, the way that I brought it up was coming from anxiety and kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to do me. But taking whatever judgments out of it, what was really happening was this pattern. The sequencing was off. And we did eventually work through this. But now I know when we go into a conversation about something that we might do together, I have to lean in to the togetherness piece more and take into account the fact that Jenny might be excited about this, and to not just bail on her if we don't have an immediate resolution. And Jenny can lean more into understanding that we are different people with different needs and that it might not work out for us to do this together, and to be more direct and clear on what she wants as an individual so that we can have an honest conversation about this. Because Jenny can have a tendency to maybe give up parts of what she wants to make the we happen, to make the trip happen, and then come in later and say, oh, actually, I don't know if this is going to work for me, which can be frustrating for me because she's not clear on what she needs because she's just trying to make it happen together. And I can have a tendency to want to pull back and do things on my own because it just seems like it's going to be harder with her. And that's an area where I can just grow my capacity to be with the anxiety that comes up with some of the conflict and stay in conversation to really see if we can make something work. Another example, and this comes up quite a bit, is that I tend to be very punctual. I can manage blocks of time in my head. I usually have a pretty good idea of how long something's going to take me to get ready to accomplish the task. to be on time to things, even early. I like to be early. That helps relax my nervous system if we're getting together with people. Even sometimes if we just plan to go out at 11 or something, for some reason, it feels better for me if we actually stick to that, even if there's nothing at stake. And Jenny tends to be running a little bit more behind. Sometimes it's 3 to 5 minutes if we're getting together with people, or for bigger things where there's nothing really at stake, it can be 15, 30 minutes. She's got to push back because she's getting ready or needs to eat. She has a lot more items that she's tracking if we're going out, like let's say on a hike or something. And so this is something we constantly have to manage is our time. And earlier on in our relationship, when she'd be running late, I would get more and more stressed and start to get resentful and sometimes even criticize her or be sarcastic. And that wouldn't really feel good for her. So we were getting into these patterns of like anytime we knew we had to be somewhere, both of our anxieties would go up because Jenny's really wants to get it right and be on time. And I'm bracing myself for her being late and just the flood of anxiety that I'm going to feel about it. And initially, when we talked about it, I was like, well, you just be on time and that'll resolve the issue. And she was like, okay, I really want to work on that. That seems like something to strive for, but it would still happen sometimes. And here we go again into this pattern. And now this is rarely an issue for us because I understand that we're not the same person. There's more that it takes for Jenny to get ready to go out the door, and her mind doesn't work like my mind. It doesn't track time in the same way, which is not a problem. So I can have more patience and compassion and understanding for the way that her mind works and the anxiety that she can even feel when she's running a little bit late. And I don't have to pile onto that and criticize her. What's more important, that we get to the place exactly on time, or that Jenny and I stay in connection and feel supportive of each other? It's the second one. And at the same time, Jenny's been able to see the reasons why I like to be on time. It's not just anxiety. People might be waiting on us. If we start getting ready earlier, then we don't have to rush at the end. We don't have to rush out the door. We don't have to drive fast. Not that we drive too fast, but there's just not that pressure there. So there's a benefit to just being more punctual the moment we know we're going somewhere. So I can encourage her to get ready earlier and she can track that, give herself more time than she thinks she needs. And so this dance, we just do it much better today. And for me, regardless of what Jenny does, I see this as an opportunity just to grow my capacity to be more patient. Patience is always a good thing. What I mean by patience is just having more mindfulness around my somatic experience and my stories and being able to manage that. It doesn't mean that I couldn't still stand up for wanting to be on time, or if the lateness got worse and it was 15 or 30 minutes that we were late to meet people or to show up at an event, that I couldn't say, hey, this really isn't working. The patience that I'm talking about is this internal experience that I'm having. When my anxiety goes up and I can't manage my emotions, I get dumber. I might say things that are hurtful. Again, I don't say things that are that hurtful. Like I don't call Jenny names, but she can feel the energy of the resentment or the frustration. And that's hurtful. And then I just don't have as good of an experience in my life generally. Impatience sucks. Things are always happening in life that require patience. And so if we can't cultivate this, life is going to be exhausting. And we're going to be beholden to external circumstances constantly bombarding us and us not being able to deal with it. So this is where meditation, mindfulness come in, and frameworks, so that I don't see some of these things as negatives. They're opportunities for patience. So hopefully that helps you understand how Jenny and I manage this. And I think that this applies in a lot of situations that I see couples in. Often the thing that they're fighting about is really small, but the core issue is that they can't hold what's happening for them and stay relaxed and stay calm and get clear on what they're really needing, and to communicate that directly to their partner, and then do this dance together and have frameworks to understand these differences, and that they don't necessarily have to be a problem. Irreconcilable differences do not have to end a relationship. You're going to have them no matter what, and there are ways and skills that you can work on holding this together, talking about it, and even helping each other grow, because there's a light and dark to everything. And sometimes the thing that you judge in the other is the exact thing that you need to help cultivate more in yourself. I think about Jenny's being late, and it's like she just doesn't hold some of that tightly, right? And there's a benefit to that. There's also a lot of benefits to being on time. Both are beneficial, but one is not better than the other. And I actually respect the fact that Jenny holds time a little bit more loosely, but I also respect my need to be on time and the benefits that come from that. And that's what brings this thing full circle. This is why we don't fight about this, argue about this very much anymore, because we have a wider view of it all. So I think I will end the episode there. There's a lot more I could say about this, but that's it for today. If you want to get involved in a men's group, or if you need one-to-one or couple support, you can go to my website, www.bricebauer.com. All right, see you next time. Peace.